Welcome to Electrified. It's your host, Dylan Loomis. So first up today, we get the weekly insurance data from Tesla China, the number 18,712. Here's that data plugged into the chart, and if you would like to compare it to the same week in quarter four, that number was 10,254. As you can see, this most recent week is the highest weekly reading on this list, so let's go back a little bit further. You have to go all the way back to quarter three of 2022, specifically the week of September 19th, when Tesla posted over 23,000. But as far as I can tell, this is the second best week for Tesla China insurance data that we've seen. There are not necessarily official expectations, but the whisper number, if you will, was in the neighborhood of between 16 and 17,000 for this week. So the last 2 weeks really have been better than expected, and as you can see, we are trending in an area that's actually exceeding what Tesla was doing during quarter four, when many people were rushing to take advantage of those NEV incentives that ended at the end of 2022. In my opinion, Tesla's numbers look even better when you start to look around the rest of the industry. Now we're looking at the same data for BYD. For the week, they were at 38.4 thousand. If you wanted to compare it to the same week in quarter four, that number for BYD was 50.4 thousand. So as you can see, BYD is behind the pace of Q4 when Tesla was actually ahead of their pace in Q4. Here's the bar chart for BYD, and what do you notice? So far in quarter one, they've been fairly steady, but significantly below where they were actually at in quarter four. Simply put, this is telling us that Tesla is on pace to exceed what it did in quarter four, which in such a tough environment and all of the price cuts, both EVs and ICE vehicles, is super impressive. Meanwhile, BYD is set to fall short of what it was doing in Q4, which gives credibility to some of those rumors that BYD demand has been slowing, and we'll get to that in a second. So if we come back to look at the table for Tesla, this is Q1 of 2023 and this was Q1 of 2022. So total domestic sales for Q1 last year for Tesla, 108.3 thousand. If you add up the total so far for Q1 of this year, Tesla has already exceeded that figure, currently sitting at 109.8 thousand. So far, the high watermark for a quarter from Tesla China domestic deliveries is 121.6 thousand, which was done in quarter four. That means Tesla really only needs roughly 12,000 more domestic deliveries over the remaining, we'll say, 1.5 weeks left, which I'll just say seems pretty likely. Looking around the rest of the industry, we have XPeng, who said in Q4 they expect total vehicle deliveries between 18 and 19,000 in the first quarter of this year. If you go to XPeng's financials, you'll see that in quarter one of last year, they actually delivered 34.5 thousand vehicles. So their guidance for Q1 of this year was about 50% lower than what they did last year. And what have they actually been doing? Well, if you go to this chart from the CNEV post, you can see this column is XPeng. They've been hovering in the neighborhood of around 1,500 units per week. So if you multiply that by roughly 10 weeks so far into the quarter, that would only be about 15,000 units so far, with again roughly a week and a half left. And shifting back to BYD, it sounds like that rumor that we reported on yesterday may actually be true, unless this Reuters article is just picking up on that same source. Either way, Reuters is saying BYD has reduced shifts at 2 assembly plants in China. They're set to work only 4 days a week in a factory running 2 8-hour shifts per day. Although BYD did not give a reason for this production slowdown, one of the people familiar with the matter said that BYD was throttling back on production in the face of weaker industry-wide demand in China since the start of the year, which definitely makes Tesla's accomplishments even more impressive. So far, no word on how long this factory slowdown for BYD will last. I would just add, if it really is a demand problem, it's going to last until what? Demand picks back up. And as we've now said for weeks, part of the problem for the competition over there is that Tesla is now relatively much more attractive to these other companies after their significant price cuts after the turn of the year. It's pretty simple. Tesla is now gobbling up more market share after its price cuts, and Tesla is not even operating at full capacity in Shanghai when it comes to a production standpoint, nor should it be expected to, again, given the circumstances in the Chinese market. This is a great number from Tesla China in my book and puts them squarely in the conversation to set a new record for domestic deliveries out of Tesla China this quarter. California has been leading the way in pushing to ban ICE vehicles from the state, and now it's looking to do something similar, this time in the heavy trucking space, as it awaits some waivers for the EPA to do so. The word is the Biden administration is going to approve new California rules to cut tailpipe pollution and phase out sales of diesel-burning trucks. The EPA intends to grant California these waivers. These heavy-duty trucks account for nearly a third of the state's smog-forming nitrogen oxide. This is pretty important because we already have 6 other states that have already committed to follow California's tougher standards, but none of this will happen until the EPA can grant this waiver. This new rule has stricter policies for removing nitrogen oxide and particulate matter. It applies to delivery vans, garbage trucks, and 18-wheelers, would apply to vehicles beginning with a 2024 model year. These manufacturers will have to sell increasing amounts of ZEVs each year, eventually reaching a target of all electric or hydrogen fuel cell by 2045. Here are the 6 other states that have also adopted these mandates. I would add this is far from a done deal because people are saying some of the nation's largest truck manufacturers and their lobbying groups are expected to sue to stop these policies from taking effect. When Tesla cut the price of the Model 3, it then became eligible for the IZEV incentives in Canada, which is around $5,000. As you can see though, for the month of February, 1,777 eligible Model 3s were sold. This compared to just 2 in January. The 2 is not a lack of demand, it's just that vehicle did not qualify for these IZEV incentives. Now that it does, it's no surprise that it's vaulted to the top of the list for the month. We have Ford unveiling the all-new electric Ford Explorer. Yes, this one will be a bit smaller and only for the European market, but I want to show you a clip of the unveil video because it had some Apple-esque vibes.
Follow me into the heart of the all-electric Ford Explorer. It's battery. This powerhouse has all the capacity to get any expedition underway. All-electric exploring just got real. Every great adventure needs a great soundtrack, and this next-generation soundbar brings a beautiful audio experience to every journey. Staying connected on the move is easy with this, the 15-inch Sync Move tilting touchscreen. It mirrors my favorite apps. It helps me plan my adventures. And it's smart enough to know exactly where I need to charge along the way. So let's go. This is the new all-electric Ford Explorer. This is exploring reinvented.
We don't really get any information about the vehicle. We don't know the powertrain specs. It is only slated for Europe at this point, but Ford has said that there will be an American model. We just don't yet know when. That one should be a little bit bigger and maybe actually have 3 rows instead of the 2 like this one. The pricing is set to be around $48,000, and Ford is now taking reservations for deliveries later this year. So far, great job by Ford, good marketing, I like the video, and good job on them for getting Lexi Limitless to be a part of this unveil for Ford. If you didn't know, she's the youngest person to travel to every country, which is apparently a world record. And of course, it doesn't hurt that she's a looker, and yes, I'm allowed to say that. Even Ashley said that she was very pretty. Apparently, the EU has given back to some pushback from Germany and other countries, and they're set to allow sales of new cars with combustion engines after 2035 if they run only on climate neutral e-fuels. The draft proposal includes creating a new type of vehicle category in the EU for cars that only run on carbon neutral fuels. Currently though, one complication with this draft is the fact that they would have to use new technology that would prevent these same vehicles from driving if other fuels are used. Sources have said the need for these vehicles to be able to detect what type of fuel is being used, so essentially they can't run on regular gas. This would largely force automakers to develop new engines. A research report found that all planned e-fuel projects worldwide would only produce enough to cover 10% of Germany's demand for use in aviation, shipping, and chemicals in the next few years. I would guess we'll see a lot more back and forth with this in the months and years ahead. This one is honestly painful to read. We have a former Tesla exec. He was the head of Tesla Australia. He pled guilty to insider trading. He only made $28,800 apparently on this move when he bought a lithium company with inside information. So you have to ask, was it really worth it? From Reuters, some EV charger manufacturers are now scrambling to comply with these Made in America rules that are going into effect sooner than some were expecting, as they've been awaiting the government to make up their mind. The requirements will immediately require assembling chargers at US factories and using US-made iron or steel enclosures. Some requirements like the component sourcing have been pushed back until mid-2024, but clearly not all of them. In the short term, not great for the EV charger rollout, of course. This will slow things down, but it's a good thing for Tesla because they're already making their superchargers in New York. Matthew DR put together a very good tweet thread comparing the Model 3 cost to the Prius when you talk about out-the-door costs, including things like dealer markups, and this is without any federal or state incentives for the Model 3. On average, the Model 3 was actually over $400 more affordable than a Prius. When you add in federal incentives, the Model 3 then becomes $7,900 more affordable on average. And then if you add in state incentives, the Model 3 is then over $12,400 more affordable. The full thread from Matthew will be linked below. I would definitely encourage following him on Twitter and YouTube. It's always a good time to be a fan of Tesla, but right now it feels like an extra exciting time. You can find me on Twitter at DylanLoomis22. Hope you guys have a wonderful day. Please like the video if you did, and a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters.